Sometimes we come across a structure that is very, very clear resolution and contains many features that are common with all the other structures, but just stands out because it's so clear and because it represents something that has to be intelligent design as opposed to a natural formation like a crystal or things like that. So this was one of these that I've labelled number 225, and from a height high up, straight away we see this can't be just a natural structure, which the others could be sort of labelled because they've got all the zigzag patterns and things like that. It just represents the common type of formation, which is a cavity or excavation. Larger rod-like structures on one side always, usually always with a very straight line excavation around the edge, which we can see there. It's a bed a little bit higher up. And then always some sort of zigzag fine pattern on the opposite side, and these can be seen very clearly. That's a right angle there. Now these either could be, I believe, horizontal rectangular rods. Now the interesting point is if we use the feature on top here, which is the actual time period or the time that actually could take into account shadow effects, we see the internal rods seem to sometimes disappear from view if the angle of the sunlight is not good. So this is an example. This is just speeding up the time. As you see, the dates are actually popping up, so we actually are going forward there if you look on the actual date and time. So these do disappear according to the angle of the sunlight. Next, when we use the ruler device, I think these are actually, rather than being vertical rods, they seem to be horizontal. I don't see any shadows forming. And if we use the ruler device, they're about the average size of buildings, which we see here, which I loosely call buildings or structures. That's 110 meters wide. So again, the consistency is larger rod structures on one side, excavation or cavity in the centre, usually for internal rod-like structures, and that very fine pattern around it. Now this was also seen in 3 or 4 in Mars, which I've also labelled in previous videos, but they were huge. They were about 4.5 kilometres wide, some are 2.5 wide, and again they had that pattern of larger tubes on one side, rod-like structures, internal, a deep excavation rather than a crater, and these zigzag patterns around. And if we go higher up, the rulers generally will see similar structures. So let's just go a lot higher up. We'll see 2 or 3 here with shadows, but these aren't as clear as the ones we've labelled as 225. 225 stands out very, very well as being a structure that does not look naturally designed. So with all these other ones that are on the moon landscape, people can say, well, they could be this, they could be that. There are zigzag patterns, but where's the proof? How do we know these are just not crystal formations or things on the lunar surface? Surely we haven't got the buildings or structures there that are actually intelligent design. And here's a rim of towers that also we find consistently happening around what appears as a deep tunnel rather than a crater, and they're always lined by tubes on the other side as well. So that's an example of that. So sometimes we do find one example that sticks out, and this is one that we'll concentrate on. I've labelled that as 225, just because it's got that very definite straight line courtyard effect around major structure, which is always common. The larger rods on one side, what looks like a definite tunnel or excavation of internal rods, and always that little zigzag pattern around the other side. So this can't be just a photo aberration of the lunar surface, and as opposed to these ones here, for instance, that do seem to throw a shadow, but not that clear in resolution. So once all the others are sort of looked at quickly, and we zoom up even higher, that represents one of the most clearest ones we found. And that can be easily seen by quickly comparing the rest of the landscape, and this obviously was labelled as well because it just seemed to stick out. And yes, it did. It's got about 4 or 5 tubular structures there. Again, we see that zigzag pattern happening. That would be probably the same type of length. We'll just do a quick check. Pick that distant one. That's about 80 meters. We've got those zigzag patterns happening, and if we use the actual time interval on there, we'll see that internal rod disappears. So all these internal ones that can be caught by the sun are actually hidden by the shadows. These pop up, as you can see when I'm playing with the time zone. Well, there you go. There's one more example again of the same type of phenomenon, and I've also made a separate one comparing that to the Mars ones. There's only 3 or 4 that I found on Mars, and they're extra large. So yeah, just sort of comparing quickly to the surrounding landscape. Sometimes these very clear ones come up, and most times they don't. They just do a type of pattern that could look very random from high up, but when you zoom in, like that there just looks so random. But then when you analyse it closer, and we haven't actually analysed this before, you'll see it's very luminous on one side. It represents these towers just seem to be on one side. I think many times that dark area could be a shadow of the surrounding structures on that side. So this could be it. We see the peak there and the shadow there, and we'll see the rod-like structures on this side as well. So from very high up, this looks like a random bright type of a structure, but close down just fits in a normal pattern of what you're seeing. That's 400 meters. And again, it just represents a deep tunnel rather than a crater impact. Are these entrance points for UFOs? Are there bases underground that these lead to? These are the questions that I constantly ask, and just zoom back into 225. Just because this one stands out a fair bit as being something that does not look a natural design or unnatural formation like a crystal, and displays all the characteristics we've seen in all the others, but a lot clearer a definition. So by looking at that, again, we have all these questions. It is not a natural. Who put it there? Why is it designed that way? What's actually inside these rods? Do we have an atmosphere in there, or oxygen, or any other gas? Why are some luminous, some are not? Are these courtyards around the structures? And obviously, who put them there? They don't look human designed, or are they? That's the question. Why would they have that zigzag pattern always on one side, larger structures on the other? Is it some type of energy apparatus which requires that sort of configuration? These are the questions non-stop which you can ask yourself when you analyse these structures on the far side of the moon. They're there, they're all easily accessed by Google Moon. I don't think they're purposely placed there as decoys to some theory of what could be there. I think they're real pictures from satellites, and I think obviously they aren't human formed. I think they're alien. They're not natural for sure. Are they empty? Have they been left empty? Are we trying to inhabit these, or is this a joint NSA alien base that they constantly refer to in literature that I've read, but it was too hard to believe? So I'll let you decide yourself. Again, these are very clear images, and that's all for this episode, which is concerning the structure that's labelled 225.